In this video we will see how to access the process editor, and learn how to use it. We will see what are the different levels of information that you can add to your processes. You will also learn where to find this different information. After watching this video, you will be able to model a process with full documentation. We will see how to use and access the process editor. You have two options for creating a process. You can directly access the process editor by clicking on this icon. Or you click directly on the plus icon at the top right to create a process. First of all, we will see how to access the process editor. I click on the process editor. If you already have processes that have been created and modeled in your HEFLO environment, then you will have access to a process selection screen. If you are a user with an administrator role, then you will find all the processes in your environment, whether or not they are published in the process portal or in automation. You can also create user roles to limit access to the list of processes available on this screen. We will see that in an upcoming video. You have the option of searching for your processes using keywords. To give you an idea, I write the word finance. The system will then search for both processes that have the word finance in their name, and processes that contain this word in the process documentation. This word can be the name of a task, for instance, or a word contained in the documentation associated with any element of the process. I now put the keyword, sales. As you can see, there is a process called sales, and this search term appears in the title of the process. If no other process appears, this means that this process is the only one which contains in its title, its elements or its documentation, the keyword, sales. You also have the option to search by category. We will see later in this video how to associate a process with a category. If you click on one of these categories, for example, human resources, then you will find all the processes that are associated with this category. When you click once on a process, then you have a better overview of it. In addition to that, you have a clock icon at the bottom right. If you click on it, you can then see the different existing versions of this process. We will see the version concept in another video. To open a process in the editor, then select the version and click on OK. Or double-click on the image of the process to open the latest version available. We will now create a new process. Click on New Diagram. From then on, you have two choices. You can create a BPMN process. This is the type of process you will create in the vast majority of cases. Indeed, you will model your various operational and transverse processes using the BPMN 2.0 notation. You can also create process landscapes. We use this type of process to model the value chain of your company. It is a level above the BPMN processes. The objective will be to highlight the organization of the company, and sometimes even its strategic orientation. This type of process uses a free notation. You will use this type of process to improve the navigation of your users through your different processes. We will see this in more detail in an upcoming video. I will now create a BPMN process that I will call Purchase of Material Goods and Services. We are now on the Process Editor page. This page is divided into 3 parts. On the left side, you will find the different BPMN elements. There is Start Events, Intermediate Events, End Events, the different types of gateways, the different types of tasks, the different sub-process activity elements, data objects, used in particular for process automation, pools and lanes, the groups, and the various annotations. The aim is to use these elements to model a process on the central part of this page. On the right you will find several tabs. Here you have access to different tools that allow you to add information to your modeled process and trigger different actions. There is a tab of Properties. This is where you will define important information about your process, or any component of it. You also have access to the Actions tab. You will be able to control the life cycle of your process by triggering certain actions. This tab concerns the Feedback part. This is where you will find all the comments concerning both the addition of the process and the documentation of the process published on the portal. This feature allows you to communicate both with other process analysts and with the various users involved in the documentation of the process you are on. You also have access to a Support tab which provides information concerning the process editor. On the upper part, you have access to knowledge base articles on the various existing themes. I remind you that you can access the entire knowledge base by clicking on this icon. You also have access to videos from our YouTube channel. These videos can help you master different concepts. There is also access to our Academy for the Modeling course. This one aims to help you master the BPMN 2.0 notation. If you have access to this course, simply click on the link of the video that interests you and you will be redirected to the HEFLO Academy website. If you do not yet have access to this training, you can access a free course. On this last tab, you have the possibility to add attachments to the documentation of your process. We will now be able to model our process. If you want to learn more about BPMN 2.0 process modeling, I invite you to take our modeling training. The first step in modeling is to add a pool. The pool corresponds to the universe in which the process takes place, and the lanes correspond to the different participants who will be responsible for the different stages and tasks of the process. Once the pool and lanes have been modeled, we can add the various BPMN elements to create our process workflow. I will first model the process, and then we will see how to associate information with it. We start by adding a start event. Then you have the option to either create an item from your start event, or select an item from the BPMN toolbox on the left side. You can then link the elements together. You have the ability to move items around to better organize your workflow. You also have the option of changing the name of a task. You can do this in 2 different ways. You can double-click like this, and put the name that suits you. Then you click out of the element and the name will be saved. We will now add another element. I want to add an intermediate event of type message and which has throw behavior. To change the properties of an element, you can then select the element, and go to the Properties tab. I will change the behavior of this element. You will learn more about event behaviors in automation training. You can also change the name of an element in the Properties tab. We will now continue modeling the whole process by customizing the names of the different elements and lanes. We will then see how to associate more information in the Properties tab. The modeling of our process is now complete. We do have a beginning, a middle, and an end, as with any BPMN process. We will see at the end of this course if the mapping of this process complies with the BPMN 2.0 notation. We will now see how to customize and give more information to your process. Now let's go to the Properties tab. You may see something interesting. The tab adapts to the selected element. It adapts to the different levels of the process. For example, here I haven't selected anything, so I'm at the process level. So you can see information about the process as a whole. And if I select a lane, you will see that the information on the Properties tab will change. It will be the same case if I select a task, or even a gateway. Each time you select a process element, the Properties tab adapts to the selected process element. If you want to see the information about the process, then you just have to go to the Properties tab without selecting anything or by clicking outside the pool. What information is available at the process level? You have the process name. You also have the version number. We will see the process versions in more detail in an upcoming video. You can see if the process automation option is enabled. You will see this topic in more detail in the automation training. There is then a section concerning the documentation associated with this process. What is the point of this section? You can associate textual and visual documentation with your process. The purpose of this documentation is to present your process, its objectives, and other information that you want to make visible to the various users who will have access to the documentation of this process. You must click the pencil icon to associate documentation with the selected process or item. On this screen we can add the information we want. You can write text, format it, and even add other elements. I will now write information to introduce the process and its purpose. This information will then be visible in the documentation of the process, when it is published. We can click on Confirm to validate this documentation. You now have an overview of the documentation associated with the selected process or element. If you want to edit this documentation, then just click on the pencil icon again. We are now going to see an interesting piece of information, which is the categorization of processes. We have seen previously that we can search by category for processes to be edited. In the process properties, we can associate a category with the process. By clicking here, you have access to the list of existing categories in your environment. You can also create a category by clicking on the plus icon. You are then directed to another screen where you must fill in the information for this new category. You must choose a name, and you have the option of choosing a color and an icon. I will add a name. I will now choose a color. You have the possibility to choose a color among predefined colors, or to define a color yourself. And finally, I will choose an icon from the list of available icons. You can click on Confirm to validate the creation of your category and automatically associate your process with it. You can find all the existing categories and other interesting information by clicking on this icon. Then click on Categories to find the list of existing categories in your environment. If you wish, you can edit a category by clicking on this element. You can then modify its properties. There is also the possibility to create a category from this screen. For this you must click on the plus icon. You can also archive a category. This is not intended to delete a category, but to no longer make it accessible. HEFLO gives the possibility to restore an archived category. We will make an example with the Operations category. I will click on Archive. From then on, this category is no longer visible in my list. If you want to view archived categories, then you need to click on this button. By selecting this option, you display all categories archived or not. You can also add a column to your list to have this information. As you can see, the Operations category is archived. I will now restore this category. For this we just have to go to the Category Edit screen and click on Restore. Finally, I'm just going to put the list back in its original format. You can also access the list of processes that exist in your environment. You will then find information about your processes. You can see the name of the processes, their category, and their author. The author of a process is the user who created the process. You have the process type information. You can also add columns to this list to provide additional information. You also have the option of triggering certain actions by clicking on these icons. If you click on this one, you then have access to the list of the different versions of the process concerned, and you can open the version of the process by clicking on this icon. By clicking on this icon you directly open the latest version of the process in the process editor. I will go back to the process list. You can download the latest version of a process in BPMN format by clicking on this icon. This action is also available directly in the process editor. We will see that later. You can add additional information by clicking on this icon. This is the functionality of extra fields that we will see in more detail later in this video. You can delete a process by clicking on this icon. As we have seen for the categories, it is possible to archive a process and display the archived processes by clicking on this option. This screen allows you to access all of your processes in order to help you edit them. In our case, we can update some of our processes by adding the supply chain category. We can do this for the processes, goods receiving, and suppliers registration. I will open one of the involved processes in the editor and add the supply chain category. I return to the list of processes. As you can see, the category information regarding this process is now visible. I will now open the second process by double-clicking on the line that involves it. I can now associate the category. I return once again to the list of processes. And as with the previous case, the category information is now visible for this one. You can add additional information to your process such as an internal code. This information will be visible only to users who have access to this process list. To add this type of information, it is then necessary to create a form, and to do that, it is necessary to click on this element. The form will be common to all processes of the same type. So you have to choose between BPMN and process landscape when you create your form. From then on you need to add properties or fields to this form. There is a list of properties exclusive to this type of form. If no properties are visible, then it means that you have not yet created any properties for this type of form, or that they are already in this one. If you cannot find the property in this list, then you must click on New. I'm going to create a property called ID. I have to choose the type of this property. You will learn more about form creation in the process automation training. I will choose a type, text, because the ID property can be a composition of letters and numbers. I'll leave the form with a single property for our example. We will see later in the video how we can add this new information for a process. Now back to our editor. You may notice something. When we click on the process editor, HEFLO redirects us to the last process that was opened. In our case, it is not the process that interests us. There are then two solutions to open another process. We can return to the list of processes and double-click on the line that involves it. Or we can click on the folder icon. By clicking on this icon, we will be then redirected to the screen for searching processes to edit. This is the screen we saw at the start of the video. If you see your profile picture on any of the processes, it means you are currently on the edit screen of that process. We can use the search feature to find the process. We can also browse the different pages to search for it. Or we can click on the related category. In our case, we are going to click on the supply chain category. And as you can see, we now have access to the three processes that are associated with this category. I will click on the process that interests me. I click on Purchase Material Goods and Services. I can also click on the clock in the lower right to see the existing versions. In our case, there is only one version. I will now be able to open the process in the editor. We will now see the information about the process owner. What is the purpose of this property? You can designate a user who is part of your environment. This can be a user who only has access to the portal. He does not need to be an administrator or a process analyst. This user will then have to validate the publication of the process documentation. This is an intermediate step between the moments when the process analyst publishes the process documentation, and when it is visible in the portal by all users who have access to it. This is a publication control feature. We will see an example in the process portal video. I will select a person from the list of users who have access to my environment. We will see in our last lesson how to invite users into our environment. From then on, when the analyst publishes the documentation of this process in the portal, Mary Davies will receive an email and a notification informing her that a process is awaiting her approval. The process will be visible in the portal only after validation by Mary Davies. We will now look at the other properties of the process. Here you have the information about the author of the process. This is a property that cannot be changed. The author is the user who created the process. Then we have the extra fields. This is the additional information that we can add to our process thanks to the form that we have created in the list of processes. Indeed, if we click on the button, Extra Fields, we are then redirected to the form that we created previously. I will put an ID to this process, and click on Save. We go to the list of processes to find this new information. We can add a column to our list. We can find the property of our form. As you can see, the information concerning the ID of the purchase material goods and services process is present. The purpose of this feature is to allow you to add specific information to your various processes. We will now return to the process editor. As I explained previously, it is possible to associate documentation at the process level and at the level of a task or other BPMN element. I will select a task. As you can see, the properties are different. I will now click on the pencil icon in the Documentation section. I want to add documentation that will correspond to this task. I can put text, as we saw previously. You can format this text. You can also change the text color. You can add tables by clicking on this icon. Then just choose the number of columns and rows. From that moment you must fill in the different cells of this table. You can improve the formatting of the table. For example, you can center text or add spaces to make cells larger. Finally, as seen previously, you can format the text. You can add images by clicking on this icon. Then just upload the image from your computer and format it. It is also possible to include videos by clicking on this icon. You must then add the link of the video. This video will then be visible in the process portal for users who have access to the relevant process documentation. Once you are done, click Confirm to save the documentation. An overview of all the documentation will be visible in this section. We will now add documentation for all BPMN tasks and elements that require detailed documentation. We have now finished associating documentation with our process and our various BPMN elements. We can now add an additional level of information by adding attachments. You must click this icon to be able to add attachments. As for the properties, this functionality adapts to the selected element. If you do not select any item, then you will be at the process level. We will now add an attachment to our process. We must then click on this element, and then select the document. You can add different file formats. It can be an Excel document, a text file, an image, a video, or other file types. I will choose this document for our example. This document will be visible and downloadable by users who will have the rights to access the process in the portal and download attachments from it. If you want to add an attachment to a particular task, then just select it and click on the menu item corresponding to the attachments. As you can see, you still have the information of what was attached at the process level, and you now have the option to add an attachment at the selected task level. I will now add an attachment to this task. For information, HEFLO has an antivirus scan for each document added as an attachment. Before talking about the Actions tab, we will see some concepts often used in process modeling. To begin, we will see how to integrate an existing process into our process. Here we have a Register Supplier task. Suppose that it includes several steps, and in our case it even corresponds to an existing process. Our goal now is to integrate this process. How can this be achievable? We are going to use a call activity. This element is intended to invoke another process. I select this item. I give it a name. I'm going to delete this task and link my gateway to my call activity. My goal now is to link this call activity to another process. To do this, I select the element and go to the Properties tab. I now click on this icon. From then on we can choose the target process. In our case, we can choose the process, Register Supplier. We can also choose the version of the process. I advise you to choose the latest version, because HEFLO will automatically update the link if a new version is created. We click on Confirm. From now on, if we click on the call activity, then we can see in the properties the link that was made. Moreover, and if we click on this arrow, then we are redirected to the linked process. When the process is published, it will then be possible to click on the call activity and be redirected to the documentation of the linked process. There may also be another case where we want to create a sub-process without reusing an existing process. Let's take the example of the task, make the purchase. This task can be broken down into several tasks, and unlike the call activity, we need a sub-process which will be adapted only to this process, and which will be located exclusively in this lane. In this case, we can use a sub-process type element. I will select this element and give it a name. I can now delete my task and link my gateway to my sub-process. I click on the sub-process and go to Properties. There is an important option, that of is inline. If I turn it on, from then on, when I click the plus in my sub-process element, it will open a window in my process to model the sub-process. And if we click on dash, it will collapse my sub-process back to the initial shape. If we choose to click off, and we click plus, then this will open another tab and another process editor. For ergonomic reasons, I advise you to choose this option if your sub-process exceeds 3 tasks, which will be the majority of cases. My goal now is to model my sub-process. This editor gives you the possibility to choose BPMN elements, except for lanes and pools. Indeed, I remind you that a sub-process takes place only in the lane of the process in which it is located. We can now add the different tasks. As you can see from the beginning of this video, I use an infinitive verb and a complement to name a task. This is part of good practice in BPMN. We can now return to our process. We will click on the plus of the sub-process. As you can see, we are then redirected to the sub-process that we have just modeled. Back to our process. I will now ask you a question. Does this part of the process follow BPMN standards? I give you 5 seconds. The answer is no. Indeed, our process does not end with supplier's registration, so we must link this call activity to our sub-process. I advise you to follow our course on modeling if you could not answer this question. After modeling the process, we will be able to trigger different actions. We will click on the Actions tab to discover them. There are different types of actions. There is the life cycle part. We'll go into more detail about these different actions in our video on publishing and improving process documentation. There is the import-export part. The export functionality allows you to export this process version into a BPMN type file. This is very useful if you want to import this process into another HEFLO environment. I will export the process in BPMN format. This is the same type of export we saw earlier in the list of processes. You also have the option to import a BPMN process by clicking on this item. You will then need to select a file with a BPMN extension. Once selected, HEFLO will open the process in the process editor, and you can edit it. You can also import a process by clicking the plus button at the top of this page. Then click on Import Process. I insist on the fact that the export is done on the version of the process on which you are in the editor. We will see the notion of version in the next video. I also insist that you must import files with a .bpmn extension for BPMN processes, and with a .landscape extension for process landscape. We will see the process landscape type in more detail in another video. There is the documentation part. Several actions are possible. You can download your process diagram image. We're going to download the image of our diagram. And we're going to open it. As you can see, the dimensions of the diagram are determined automatically to allow viewing the image in full screen. You also have the option of downloading your process documentation in PDF or HTML format. You will then find the diagram of your process, and all the documentation associated with it. We will download the process documentation in PDF format. There is an overview page. If you have customized your environment with a specific logo, it will appear on this page. We will see how to customize your HEFLO environment in an upcoming video. There is also a summary of the information you will find in this document. Then you have a process presentation page, then the diagram, and finally the pages containing the documentation associated with this process. You will also find links that will allow you to view and download process attachments. Then you have the possibility to publish the documentation of this process in your portal. This makes this documentation accessible to all users who have access to this portal, and to the process documentation concerned. This feature allows you to ensure the sharing of up-to-date documentation and information to all relevant users. Finally, there is the automation part. This part will be presented in our training on process automation. Thank you for taking this HEFLO process editor course. In the next video, we will see how to publish the documentation of a process in the portal. We will also see how to access it and how it works. We will also look in more detail at how to improve and update your process. Goodbye and see you next lesson.